Hi everyone, I am Chef Manel Bouillet and I'm the President Ambassador. Today the video is how to use the butter sheet from President in order for you to incorporate perfectly this butter into the dough and make perfect croissant. So the packaging of our butter sheet is very convenient. It is actually tear-proof. So this makes it very easy when you peel off like the top of the butter, and then you will see that the inside is very nice in terms of color, in terms of smell, and of course in terms of taste. Our butter sheet is of course made in France, and then you will see that the process is very special. This is a fermented butter. Fermentation will bring you an amazing flavor and will last for longer. Our 84% butter sheet has a melting point superior to 34 degrees Celsius, which makes it very easy to work in a hot environment. So we are now ready to use our butter sheets. So over here, as you can see, the 84% butter sheets comes in 2 kg, which is actually very convenient. Because if you're doing like a big production, then you can just use straight away these 2 kg. However, if tomorrow you're doing like a smaller production, then you can divide it just in half, which is 1 kg plus 1 kg. So let's now divide it. So as you can see, since we have the line, that is actually very easy just to divide it. Here we go. Then we have a perfect 1 kg and 1 kg. So our croissant dough is now ready. So this one has been mixed yesterday. Then it has been resting overnight into the chiller, ideally around 0 to -3 degrees Celsius, in order to make sure that the fermentation is not starting. This is actually very important. So at this stage, we have something around 35 by 35 centimeters. So now we're gonna start to use the dough chiller and make it a little bit longer in order for us to incorporate the butter in the middle and then fold the butter inside and then have the dough on the top of the butter. I will show you that in a moment. Make sure at this stage you put a little bit of flour to make sure that the dough doesn't stick to the rollers. The goal at this stage is to keep something as rectangular as possible, because then later on we have to spread our butter and then place it just in the center and cover the butter with the dough. So at this stage, what's very important now is to check the size of it. Right here, as you can see, our dough is around 38 cm. And then on the other side, our dough is about 58. So meaning that the butter right here will have to be around maybe 29 times 38 in order to match perfectly this dough. Then I will place this dough back into the chiller, and then we're gonna take care now of our butter sheet. And see you in a bit. So as you have seen previously, we have been cutting the butter over here as 500 grams. But of course, as I mentioned in the video, you can cut whatever you want. As you can see over here is straight from the chiller. You can also take it out a little bit in advance. 5–10 minutes outside the chiller will help it to have something less firm. Right now, as you can see, it's nice and firm and it's gonna be easy to work with this butter. We're gonna use the dough chiller in order to make it a little bit thinner and to have the perfect temperature to have, of course, the perfect flexibility. You want to start slowly, because if you go down with the machine too fast, then you may start to break the butter. So it's very important over here to go progressively to make it wider, and then we'll make it a little bit longer. So at this stage, my butter is around 29, so it's perfect. Then what I'm gonna do is to just turn it, and then I'm gonna make it 38 to match exactly the size of my dough. So right now, as you can see, the butter is at 37. So it's actually okay as well, because the dough may start to shrink a little bit, but if necessary, I encourage you sometimes to just use a rolling pin and then to readjust the butter to make it nice and rectangular and at the size that you're expecting. So if you're just missing 1 cm or so, then just readjust the butter right here. When we talk about butter, we need to make sure that the consistency of the butter is great. And this is what we want to have. As you can see right here, if I take the butter, we can clearly see that the butter is very flexible. So just by doing that, you know that if you can do that with the butter, then definitely into the dough, the butter will not break and we'll have an amazing plasticity. So over here, I'm just gonna use like a small spatula, and that's gonna help me just to scrape the top of the butter to make sure that the butter is a little bit sticky. You can just feel it with your hands. So now I can see that the butter is very sticky on the top. Then we're gonna flip the butter over. And as you can see, the butter is aligning perfectly with the dough since we have been calculating properly. Then with a small spatula, with the same one, then I'm just gonna cut the dough on the side. Then we'll do exactly the same. You can scrape a little bit the butter to make it more sticky. The most important over here is to make the corners and the edges more sticky. For the middle, no worries, it will be okay. Then I will have the dough on the top. So I will flip over, and we want to connect the dough right here in the center. So we try to align the dough the best as we can, and then on the right side. You really want to connect well the dough in the center, and make sure that the dough is connected well. Okay, so as we can see right now, we have one layer of dough, one layer of butter, and the other layer of dough on the top. So now we're gonna be ready to make our double fold. So we are now ready for the lamination. So I'm gonna start to spread it progressively to make sure we don't squish the dough too much. You can always monitor by placing your hand on the top and making sure that the dough is not sticking. Before we start the folding, then we want to brush away the excess of flour. So right here for our double fold, we can do first over here a small first fold, and then you want to keep over here the dough as straight as possible. If you see that the other side is not super straight, then you can just bring back the dough over here on the belt, then use the rolling pin, and then readjust it as well. So at this stage, then the dough is straight. Now we're gonna be ready to make our double fold. As you can see right here, the goal is really like to join the dough as much as you can. You don't want to overlap it because then you will have more layers of butter and more dough. But you just want to connect together and make sure it doesn't move after when we start the second fold. So with your finger, you can press a little bit firmly right here in order to connect the dough. Then at this stage, what I like to do is to take the rolling pin, and then in the center of the dough, you can slightly press. In that regard over here, the dough will be nicely connected, and it's gonna be easier for me than to fold it over. So as you can see, now we have like 4 layers together. So this is the first step, we call that the double fold. So at this stage, what I like to do is just to give it a quarter of a turn like this, and then to laminate it one more time. This will help me to make it a little bit longer, and of course to stick the layers together before we place it inside the chiller or into the freezer for a few minutes. The goal at this stage is not to make it too wide or too long. It's just to connect the dough together to make it just a little bit thinner, and then it will chill faster and more evenly into the freezer or into the chiller. So here we have the perfect size. Then what I'm gonna do now is to take a cutter to cut the edges. If your flour is quite strong and you're confident with it, then you can cut all the way, no problem. So then on the other side, we're also gonna do exactly the same. Of course, on this side, we're gonna cut twice. So our first double fold is now ready. We're gonna place this dough for about 15 minutes into the freezer, or you can also help yourself with a chiller. Usually I recommend you the freezer, but make sure that the freezer is not too cold. Everything is about texture and not about timing. Then I will see you in a bit. So we are now back with the dough on the dough chiller, and as you can see now the dough is slightly more firm. The goal is to have the dough still very flexible, of course, but to have it a little bit more cold, and then it will be easier for you then to stretch it on the other side. If you don't let it rest, then definitely the dough will be, 1, too elastic, and number 2 will be way too soft because the dough will be very warm. So in that case, you may start to mix up the butter with the dough, and of course the layer won't be great. Before we start to do the second lamination, we want to actually give it a quarter of a turn and then laminate the other way. So at this stage, as you can see, I'm laminating the dough. However, I don't want to go too wide. And the reason why is because for this step, you want to actually fold it in 3 instead of 4. So in that regard, you can make it slightly more narrow. And then now what we can do is our single fold. So I will fold it over here in the center. And then we're gonna have to estimate over here how far we have to go in order for us to put back like the left side over here on top. And then make sure that the layering is perfect everywhere. You want to have the same amount of dough and butter everywhere. So we're gonna just move the dough on the side. So I'm gonna fold it. And as you can see right here, we are perfect. As you can see, it's nicely aligned. And then I wanna make sure that I press firmly like the corners and keep the dough as straight as possible. At this stage, do not hesitate just to stretch a little bit the corners. You want to make sure that, again, the layering is perfect. You want to have the same amount of dough and butter everywhere. So at this stage, we used to have 4 layers of butter, and then we have been adding 3 layers more. That means 3 times 4, then will be 12. So in this dough, we have 12 layers of butter, so which is quite normal for like a basic application such as a croissant. Right now, what I want to do is just to make it a little bit thinner, the same way as we have done before. So at the end, you should end up with something nice and rectangular. And the same way as before, we're gonna take over here our cutter and then cut all the way in order to keep our edges very straight. At this stage, your croissant dough should be placed into the freezer. So you can go between 30 to 45 minutes regarding the temperature of your freezer. The most important is to make it actually quite cold and very even. After this step, then you can place it back into the chiller in order to have like the perfect texture for the final lamination. You should not laminate the dough if it's too soft and it's too cold. If it's too cold, of course, the butter may start to break. But then if it's too soft, then the dough will be very elastic and then the dough will be very, very soft. So you won't end up with a good croissant. Then I will see you in a bit. So as you may have remembered, over here we have like 1 double and 1 single, which is 12 layers of butter into this dough. So for the final lamination over here, make sure that you put enough flour at the bottom and on the top. As you can see right now, when I take the dough in my hands, then the dough doesn't move. It's very important to have the dough a little bit firm. When I press on it, then the dough is a little bit firm, but it's not frozen. Make sure that the edges or even the center is not frozen. If you laminate a frozen dough, then definitely the butter will break, which is not what we want. So this way will be all right. Now what I want to do is to use the dough chiller and to start to spread it progressively. You don't want to rush too much the dough because you may rip the dough. Always monitor the dough, make sure the dough is at the right texture. You can put your hands underneath, and then if necessary, you can add slightly more flour. So at this stage, actually, I want to start at 3.5, and you want to laminate it twice in order to have something nice and accurate. So we are now ready. The dough is at 3.5. Now let's start to cut it. So we are now back on the table with the dough, and as you can see, I'm using some frozen wooden board. This will help me to maintain the cold temperature and make sure the dough is not shrinking while I'm cutting. So we are now ready to cut it. As you can see right here, I have prepared my bicycle set up at 9 centimeters. This is gonna be the base of our croissant. Then, of course, before we start to trace it and cut it, we have to slightly trim. We don't want to have the edge over here. So you can start to see over here, you see I'm at 33. So I'm gonna trim slightly on the edge and we'll have something surrounding 31 to 32 centimeters, it's all right. So just take like a long tape measure right here, and then we put it on the edge and just trim slightly the edge. So we do exactly the same on the other side. So at this time now, what you want to do is to take the bicycle and then we're gonna take the corner of the dough. What we want to do with the bicycle is just to mark it. You of course don't want to cut it. So just make a mark like this and then we step on the right side and follow. Then what we're gonna do is to now take the ruler and you want to mark it only in the center, which is 4.5, since we have the base at 9 centimeters. So just a small mark right here. And this will help me to have over here the top of our first croissant. So I will just make a mark again over here. This is the top. And now I'm gonna take the bicycle again. If you don't have the bicycle, you can still use the ruler, would be exactly the same. And now I'm gonna do exactly the same on the other side. So we are done with the bicycle, and now let's start to cut it. Okay, so now we will cut on the other side, and now we should have a beautiful triangle. And then we're gonna follow up. So we are now ready for rolling, very important, because this is what will make the final shape of our croissant. What you want to do here is just to press the end, just a little bit, and then we're gonna start to roll it, but very, very straight. So just do one small fold like this one, and then we just roll it as straight as possible. So you can start with your 2 fingers right here in the center, and then if you want, you can even finish it by hand, by rolling it, and then glue nicely the end of the croissant in the center. Press a little bit. So So we just place the end of the croissant just on the sheet pan. At this stage, you don't have to press too much. You just like press just a little bit like this, and this is okay. The most important is to keep the croissant as stable as possible. So as you can see as well, when I'm positioning the croissant on the sheet pan, it is very important to leave space between each of them. Because of course, they're gonna proof, so they're gonna take more space. And then later on, when they will bake, they will be even bigger. So we are now done to roll our croissant. So as you can see, they have been placed on the sheet pan, then ready for proofing. Proofing time is very important. Actually, timing really depends with the size of your croissant. Usually, I will do 27 degrees Celsius, then 75% humidity, approximately 2.5 hours. However, of course, if you have a smaller piece and then or a bigger one, then you may adjust this time. 2 hours 15, 2 hours and 30 minutes is an average. And I will see you just in a bit. So after 2 hours 15, 2 hours and a half, you will see that the croissants now are like nice and big. So that's perfect. Then next, I prepare over here my spray gun. So we are now done with the egg wash. So the next step, of course, is baking. If you are baking in a convection oven, I advise you to bake around 170 degrees Celsius. Then if you have the possibility of regulating the fan of your oven, 3 out of 5 is great. But then if you do not have the possibility, then don't change it, it's okay. The most important right here is like timing. 18 minutes is okay. However, then if you want to have it a little bit darker, then you can push slightly further. You want to make sure that the inside of the croissant is baked properly. If you have the possibility of regulating the damper as well to release the humidity, open it. In this way, then you will see that the croissant will get a little bit more crispy and the humidity won't be trapped inside the oven. Then I will see you in 18 minutes. So over here it's been 18 minutes, so as you can see we have a nice and golden brown color, so this is perfect. Of course you can make it darker if you want to. At this stage I really advise you to let it chill nicely on the rack for at least an hour, and then after you can cut it and see what's inside. So now we are ready to inspect it. So as you can see we have like beautiful layers, very distinct layers right here, and the color is like golden brown color. I personally like them like this, just in between. Not too dark but not too light neither. So let's check inside. Look at that. So we have a very open crumb. This is melting inside and very crunchy outside. This is the most important when you want to enjoy a boule au feu croissant. Thank you for watching and keep enjoying baking with President. See you next time.